Hi, my name's Phil. I like to talk about politics, and today's viewer's choice is the recent poll showing that the initial surge for the Liberal Democrats and especially the Brexit Party is dying down. But first, if you find yourself enjoying the video, then please consider giving it a like and subscribing to the channel. It really helps. Now, before I discuss these latest poll results, I need to go over the usual disclaimers. The first is that no poll can actually predict how parties are going to perform in a general election. It can give a reasonable idea as to how much of the vote share they might get. But the UK operates a first-past-the-post parliamentary democracy where the vote share is not the indicator of electoral success that it would be in an election where proportional representation is used. The other thing to point out is that voting intentions will swing wildly as campaigns ebb and flow. If campaigning didn't have an effect on how most people voted, then people wouldn't be spending so much time and money on it. So let's take a look at what the polls were suggesting last month in the wake of the European elections. Now, with the Conservatives in complete disarray and Labour still trying to be a soft Brexit party, the extremes of the Brexit debate were swinging behind the Liberal Democrats, mostly for Remain, though that was split amongst a few parties, and the Brexit Party for Leave, especially Leave without a deal. And when we bear in mind that there were only so many people going out to vote in the first place, then it was largely those extremes voting. Now, a month ago, the Brexit Party were riding high and one poll placed them as hoovering up 26% of the popular vote, with 22% going to the Liberal Democrats, Labour in third place and 19% with 19%, and the Conservatives in fourth with 17%. Now, as I show you how these intentions have changed, hopefully you'll see that the likely explanation is simply down to how the major parties are projecting their Brexit policy. Now, in the UK, most people don't so much vote for the party that they most like the policies of, but one of the two largest parties that they least hate the policies of. The reason for this is that the UK almost always has a majority government in Parliament. In such a situation, that party's manifesto will be implemented, apart from the bits they never liked and just ignore, and no other party will have any serious influence over that. Now, this is an odd situation for many Europeans who are used to compromise politics due to frequent coalitions. Now, it is true that the UK has had minority or coalition government for 7 of the last 9 years, but that is unusual and people still haven't adapted to that. Politicians still behave as if we're in the normal majority government position, with the largest party thinking they somehow have the right to implement whatever they please without negotiating, even though they don't have the votes, and the opposition parties largely absolving themselves of responsibility when they do now have significant voting power. Now, what I'm saying is that the default position for most voters in the UK is to vote either Labour or Conservative in a general election. For example, in 2017, Labour and the Conservatives combined won 82.4% of the vote. But with Brexit being such a key yet divisive issue, neither Labour nor the Conservatives were really appealing to anyone. Nobody knew what the Conservatives were going to do about Brexit. It just seemed that kicking the can down the road endlessly was their plan A, plan B, right down to plan Z. As for Labour, they were pushing a soft form of Brexit. Problem was that the vast majority of Labour voters supports membership of the EU, and for those who don't, no deal Brexit was becoming the only form of Brexit that seemed real, and Labour were opposed to that. So hordes of voters deserted the main parties during both the local and especially the European elections to vote for parties with a clearer line on the subject. But this has started to be reined back. The Conservatives kicked it off first with Theresa May's resignation. It became pretty clear very quickly that all the credible leadership contenders were committing to a no-deal Brexit. Or rather, they were saying that they'd like a deal, but that we'd definitely be leaving on October the 31st, come what may, and that no deal is actually fine. This started to get Brexit Party voters back online with the Conservatives, something that has picked up pace as Boris Johnson has looked increasingly likely to win, and his rhetoric has become increasingly hard on the Brexit debate. This effectively knocked Labour into fourth place in the polls until last week. So last week, Labour finally committed to being a Remain party, at least this side of the general election. They have committed to a public vote with Remain as an option under all circumstances, whether in this Parliament or the next, and they have committed to campaigning to Remain if that public vote takes place during this Parliament. Immediately after that announcement, the chart looks like this, where the Conservatives are back in first place and Labour in third, though another poll slightly more recent also placed the Conservatives and Labour neck and neck in joint first place. Still disappointing for Labour, who should be well ahead after 9 years in opposition with a self-destructive Conservative government. But that's another issue. I'll have to crack on with that later this week. And bear in mind that polls that discuss voting intentions before an election is called are always suspect because campaigning hasn't yet started. I'd personally put this down to the fact that Conservatives and Labour have both firmed up their position and they are always in campaign mode. The Liberal Democrats and Brexit Party are looking like they tend to save themselves up for more election campaigns, and support for them could easily pick up again if Labour or the Conservatives muddy the water on their Brexit policy again. Now, the reason Labour have picked up share is because of moving to a pro-Remain position. The reason the Conservatives have picked up share is because of their pro-Brexit position, or likely pro-Brexit position if Boris Johnson becomes the Prime Minister. This is why so many MPs supported Boris Johnson, even though they hate his guts, because they fear for the existence of their party and think Johnson is the only one who can beat Farage to the right-wing votes. Finally, I said at the beginning that voting intentions tell us nothing about the makeup of Parliament, even if the voting share is accurately portrayed. But there is something of interest in these polls. The Brexit Party still remain a major bloc on that poll, a very major bloc in fact. The Conservatives are desperately hoping that we leave the EU before a general election, as they think that will make the Brexit Party irrelevant and they'll collapse just as UKIP did in the wake of the referendum. They won't, but maybe that's another topic. But if we haven't left the EU before a general election and vote intentions remain as they are, you are clearly not going to get a majority government. But the Brexit Party could take an awful lot of votes away from the Conservatives. Again, remember, the first past the post completely screws with voting share. You might look at this chart and think Conservatives and Brexit Party combined would be the largest bloc in Parliament, though you'll note that it still isn't 50%. The reality is that they will just split each other's votes in each individual constituency and let in either Labour or the Liberal Democrats in lots of seats. The likelihood is that neither party would end up being the largest in Parliament at all. Such is the nature of first past the post, as opposed to proportional representation. The hilarious thing about such an outcome is that it might turn Tories into converts for proportional representation. So that's my reading of the shift in the polls. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you'd like to support the channel further, then please click on the Patreon link to learn of the exclusive available to patrons. And until next time, I'll see you later.